3 weeks, Billie said, both hands flat on the steering wheel. You only have to be my boyfriend for 3 weeks. We were parked on the third level of a hospital ramp in Duluth. I was holding a coffee I had not paid for. Whose boyfriend? Mine, Toby, obviously mine. Since when? Since 2 o'clock Tuesday morning. Here is what happened at 2 o'clock Tuesday morning. My best friend sat in a hospital room upstairs and told her grandmother she was in love. She said it with a monitor, counting the old woman's heartbeat out loud like it was keeping score. And she said it because the alternative was letting Zofia Ostrowski leave the world worried about her. Then Zofia refused to leave. She was coming home the next week with a walker, a home health aide named Renata, half the use of her left hand, and exactly one condition. She wanted to meet him. Except Billie had not invented a man. She had panicked and reached for the first name her mouth could find, and my name has been sitting in her mouth since we were 19 years old. So Zofia asked for me, by name, twice, in Polish, to be sure it stuck. That was Tuesday. It was 11 days before her mother booked a hall. 3 weeks, she said again, like the repetition was a legal document. You said that. I'm saying it twice because I need it in the room. The ramp lights buzzed. Somewhere below us, a car alarm gave up on itself halfway through. I could hear the ferry horn out on the harbor, that low note that gets into the concrete and stays there. Billie, don't say my name like that. Like what? Like you're about to be reasonable at me. She had her hair pushed up with a pencil, which was my pencil, the flat carpenter kind I keep behind my ear. She has been stealing that pencil for 15 years. There is probably a shoebox in her apartment with 100 of them in it, filed by year. She's 91, I said. 91 and a half. She counts halves now. She says at her age they're worth more. Billie, she asked if you'd come Sunday. Billie was looking out the windshield at a concrete wall, and her voice did that thing it does when she is trying to sound casual and the casual will not hold. She asked what your people do at Christmas. She asked if you're tall. I said yes. That one wasn't a lie, at least. So I'm your boyfriend. You are the man I told my dying grandmother about so she'd stop asking who was going to check on me in the winter. She turned her head. And she didn't die, Toby. She got better out of spite. And now she wants to see him at the table. Here is the part I could have said and didn't. I could have said, this is a bad idea, and here is why. I could have said, if you lie to a woman that old about something that important, you will spend the rest of your life editing the memory of her. I could have said no. I said, what do I call her? And Billie Ostrowski put her forehead down on the steering wheel and laughed, like something had been surgically removed from her chest. Then she pulled the pencil out of her hair, found an old parking receipt in the door pocket, and wrote the rules on the back of it while I watched. 1. It ends after her birthday. November 2nd. Zofia turns 92. We go to the party, and after that we tell people it just did not work out. Amicable. Boring. Nobody's fault. 2. No lying about anything except the one thing. Everything else stays true, because we are both bad liars and the truth is easier to remember. 3. Nobody gets hurt. She handed me the receipt. I put it in my wallet. It is still in my wallet. I would like to say I kept it for sentimental reasons, but at the time I think I kept it because some part of me wanted evidence. My name is Tobias Mulvaney. I'm 34 and I build staircases for a living, which is a job for a man who likes making the thing that takes other people upstairs. Billie has the other half of my warehouse on Garfield Avenue. She rebuilds pianos. Sunday came the way Sundays do, which is faster when you are dreading them. Helena Ostrowski opened the door before I knocked, which meant she had been at the window. Warm butter, browned onion, dill, and under all of it, the smell of a house cleaned that morning by somebody nervous. Tobias, Helena said, and she made my name Polish, and something in my sternum did an unauthorized thing. Take off the coat. Bogdan, he's here. Bogdan. Bogdan Ostrowski came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder and shook my hand once, hard, with eye contact that is technically a background check. You're the one with the shop. Stairs, mostly. Stairs. He nodded slowly, like he was tasting it. Good. Everybody needs stairs. Not everybody, but statistically most. He laughed. Helena laughed. Billie, behind me, made a small sound like a woman watching a man walk onto thin ice while whistling. And then I met Zofia. She was in the good chair by the window, with a blanket over her knees and her left hand resting in her lap. The way you rest. Something that belongs to you, but does not take instructions anymore. White hair pinned back with the kind of precision that takes somebody else 40 minutes and gets called no trouble. She looked at me for a long time. Long enough that Billie shifted her weight beside me. Then Zofia said, in English, slowly, because the stroke had taken some of her words and she was in the process of hunting them back down one at a time, "You are late by 15 years. The room went quiet in that particular Sunday way, where the refrigerator is suddenly the loudest thing in the house. Babsha, Billie said. I am 91, Zofia said. I say what I like. It is one of two benefits. What's the other one? I asked, dogged. She lifted her right hand about 4 inches and let it drop back to the blanket. Nobody makes me stand up. I liked her immediately, and that was the first genuinely dangerous thing that happened that day. The second happened 20 minutes later, over the second helping, when Helena set down her fork, reached under her chair, and produced a folder. Not a folder like a person keeps receipts in, a folder with tabs. So, she said, the hall on 4th is free the first weekend of November. I put down my water. Mom, Billie said, the Polish hall. They hold it 72 hours without deposit, then they want 300. Helena opened the folder and turned it around so I could see, which is a thing people do when they have already decided and are being polite about the timeline. Zofia's birthday is November 2nd. She turns 92. I am aware, Zofia said from the chair without turning around, so we do it together. Helena looked up at me with an expression I have not been able to put down since. Birthday and wedding, one weekend. Everybody's already coming. Billie said, Mom, again, and this time it did not have any structure in it. Bogdan was looking at the tablecloth. Helena was looking at me. And Billie was looking at me too. And it was not the look of a woman waiting to be rescued from her mother. It was a small, unguarded, 3-second thing, and she put it away as soon as she caught me catching it. And I sat there in that dining room with a fork in my hand and dill on my plate, and the entire architecture of a woman's family arranged around a sentence her daughter had said at 2 a.m. to keep somebody alive. That's about 7 weeks, I said. 7 weeks is enough, Helena said. We did mine in 5. That was different, Bogdan said quietly. There was a reason. There is a reason now. Helena closed the folder and put both hands on it. The reason is sitting by the window. We got out of that house at 8:15. Billie made it to the bottom of the driveway before she stopped walking, put her hands on top of her head, and stood in the middle of the street looking up at the streetlight like it owed her something. Okay, she said. Billie, okay, I'm doing the math. There's no math. There's always math. She dropped her hands. $300 is refundable up to 30 days out. So we have until the first week of October before anything is real. That's the actual deadline. Everything before that is just my mother buying napkins. Your mother has a folder with tabs. My mother has had a folder with tabs since 1994. I stood on that hill with the lake going black below us and said the sentence I should have said in the parking ramp. We have to tell her. Billie didn't answer. Not tonight. I'm not saying tonight. But your grandmother is in that chair making plans, and every day we let her make plans is a day she doesn't get to spend on something real. She is spending it on something real. She's spending it on being happy. About something that isn't happening. Billie turned around. Under the streetlight, her eyes were doing the thing where she is furious, and it is not at you, and it lands on you anyway. You want to know what she did in that hospital room? She said. She woke up at 2 a.m. and she couldn't move her arm and she couldn't find half her words, and the first thing she got out, the very first, was my name. Not Helena, not Bogdan, mine, because I'm the one nobody checks on. I'm the one who got left standing in a dress. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, fast, annoyed at it. So I gave her something to hold, and she held it, and she got out of that bed. So don't stand on a hill and tell me about real. The lift bridge horn went off down at the canal. 2 long notes, and neither of us said anything until it finished. Okay, I said. Okay what? Okay, we do it. But we tell her before the hall gets paid, and we tell her ourselves, and we tell her when she's strong, not when she's tired. I put my hands in my coat pockets. And you tell her, not me, it's yours to tell. She looked at me for a second like I had said something in a language she almost had. Fine, say it back. Tobias, I've watched you agree to things you did not agree to since we were 19. Fine, she said it properly the second time. Before the hall gets paid, I'll tell her. We shook on it. In the street. Like 2 contractors on a job neither of us had priced correctly. Billie and I met at 19 in the parking lot of a hardware store, where she was trying to fit a piano bench into a Honda Civic, using what she described as physics and what was in fact violence. I stopped to help because I was 19 and she had a laugh that carried across a parking lot without asking anybody's permission. We got the bench in. It took 40 minutes and cost her a tail light. There is a wall between our 2 halves of that warehouse with a doorway in it and no door. And there has been no door in that doorway since we signed the lease 6 years ago. And neither of us has ever brought it up. 15 years. That is the number, and I want you to hold on to it because everything expensive in this story is priced in it. Here is what I understood about myself at 34, and it took a woman with a folder to make me look at it. I build stairs for other people. 4 in the last 2 years for houses I will never sleep in. And I go home to a duplex with 1 level, a folding chair, and a kitchen table I have owned since college. Nkechi, Obi, who runs the finish room and has been trying to buy into my shop for 2.5 years, has a theory about this. She keeps the partnership papers in a drawer in the office. I know which drawer. She knows I know. You didn't sign them, she said on Monday, without looking up from the sanding block. I'm reading them. You've been reading them since Easter. Is it a long document, Tobias? Is it Russian? She blew dust off a rail cap. How was Sunday? Her mother wants to book a hall for the wedding. That stopped the sanding block. Nkechi turned around very slowly, sat down on an upturned bucket and said, "Start at the beginning and do not skip the part where you said yes," I told her. It took 11 minutes. When I was done, she was quiet for a while. And then she said the thing I carried around for the next 6 weeks, like a stone. So you finally get to be her boyfriend, and the only way you could do it was if it didn't count. That's not... Tobias. She stood up and picked the sanding block back up. I've worked 20 feet from that woman for 2.5 years. You want me to tell you what I've watched? Or you want to go be busy? I went and was busy. The first 2 weeks were, in fairness, not difficult. And that was the problem. Nothing changed except the labels. We already got groceries on Wednesdays. We already ended up on each other's couches. She already called me at 11 at night when a client's upright turned out to have a cracked plate, and she needed somebody to be angry at on her behalf. The only new thing was that now, in front of her family, I could put my hand on her back going through a doorway. That is a small piece of information, and it took up an unreasonable amount of my week. On the second Sunday, she came into my half of the warehouse at 7 in the morning with 2 coffees and her hair still wet. Field trip, she said. St. Adalbert's. Their piano's been flat since the Clinton administration, and the new priest has opinions. I have a rail to glue. Your rail can wait. My grandmother told my aunt in Chicago that you're coming to Christmas, so I need you to see me being competent at something so you don't run. That's not why I'd run. Get your coat. The church was empty and cold and smelled like radiator dust and last week's candles. Billie took the front off that upright, and then she stopped being the woman who steals my pencils. She put a wedge felt in, struck a note, and listened with her whole body, head tipped, eyes on nothing. Then again. Then a quarter turn of the hammer that I would not have been able to see if I had not been watching for it. The sound of the building changed. Not the note. The building. She worked for 2 hours, humming sometimes without knowing it. When the pedal squeaked, she went under the thing on her back with a penlight in her teeth, swore in Polish, and came out with grease on her forearm she did not wipe off. At some point, I stopped pretending to look at the ceiling beams. "You're staring," she said, from inside the piano. "I'm evaluating the joinery. It's a piano, Toby. It has joinery." She sat back on her heels and looked at me over the top of the case, and there was a long second in there that neither of us reached into to fill. Then she held out her hand. "Pencil." I gave her the pencil. She wrote a number on the inside of the lid where 100 years of tuners had written numbers, the date and her initials, joining a column of dead men's handwriting going back to 1904. "Every one of them thought they were the last person who'd ever touch it," she said. "That's the job. You do good work and you sign it small and you get in line. I have built a lot of stairs. Nobody has ever put it better than that." Then she flipped my forearm over, and before I could ask what she was doing, she wrote NOV2 on it in flat carpenter graphite, right below the wrist, and underlined it twice. "Expiration date," she said, "so we don't get confused." Cute. I'm hilarious. Ask anyone. She capped the piano and started packing her wrenches. "Also, my mother wants us at the hall Thursday to look at the room. We're not paying the deposit. We're looking at the room, Tobias. Looking is free." That mark lasted 3 days. By the 4th it was gone, and I noticed in the shower and stood there, under the water, longer than I want to describe. A 34-year-old man having a reaction to the absence of a pencil mark. I said none of this out loud. That is going to matter later. The Polish Hall on 4th Street smells like floor wax and church basement coffee. There is a stage at one end with a curtain the color of old wine, and along the side wall, framed photographs of every wedding that has been held there, going back further than anyone alive. Helena walked us down that wall like a docent. "That's my cousin Ewa. That one is the Kaczmareks, 600 people. They ran out of chairs and sent boys to the church for more. That one," she stopped. "That one is your grandmother, Zofia Ostrowski, in 1954, 19 years old, in a borrowed dress, standing next to a man with a jaw like a shovel and an expression like he had gotten away with something. 3 years off the boat," Helena said. "No money. My father's brother played accordion and they passed a hat for the priest." She touched the frame, straightened it a degree it did not need. "She wants to be on that wall twice, once as a bride and once as a great-grandmother. That's the whole thing, Tobias. That's the entire ambition of a 91-year-old woman." Billie was standing very still beside me, and I could hear her not breathing. That is when Jarrett Lundeen came out of the kitchen with a tray of coffee urns. Being unfair about Jarrett would be easy, and I have had 4 years of practice. He is a decent man who coaches squirt hockey, and whose mother has run the kitchen committee at that hall since before either of us could drive. He did not cheat on Billie. He did not raise his voice at her. What he did was wait until 11 days before the wedding, 4 years ago in this building, with the deposit paid and the flowers ordered, and then tell her he could not do it, and then admit how long he had known. He set the urns down. He saw us. His face did the thing a face does when it has already decided to be gracious and needs a second to get there. "Bill," he said. "Jarrett," I heard. He wiped his palms on his jeans. "My mom told me. Congratulations. That's really good." "Thanks. Zofia doing okay?" "Better, ornery." "Yeah." He almost smiled. "Yeah, she would be." Then to me, with his hand out. "Tobias, right? You did the rail at the Sievertson place." "I did. That's nice work." "Thanks." And that was all of it. 8 seconds, 4 sentences, a handshake, and a man walking back into a kitchen. I did not say another word for 40 minutes. Not in the car. Not at the light on 6th. I drove and I looked at the road and I want to be clear, absolutely certain that I was being calm. She let it go 3 blocks. Then she told me to pull over, and I pulled into the empty lot behind the credit union and shut the engine off. And the cab got very loud with nothing in it. "Say it," she said. "There's nothing to say. You've got a jaw like a bear trap, and you've been driving 9 miles under the limit, which for you is basically screaming." She turned in the seat to face me. "Say it. He walked out of a kitchen and congratulated you." "He did, on a thing that isn't happening." "Right. Fine, great, good for him." And Billy Ostrowski laughed once, with no humor anywhere in it, and said the sentence that I have not been able to argue with since. "You don't get to be jealous inside a lie you agreed to." The heater ticked. Somebody's dog barked twice, 4 streets over. "I'm not—" I stopped. I put my hands back on the wheel because they needed a job. "Okay, because if you get to be jealous, then it's not pretend. And if it's not pretend, then one of us has to say what it is, and I can't do that right now." Her voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, and she kept going straight through it, which is the most Ostrowski thing about her. "I have a grandmother in a chair and a mother with a folder, and I cannot also have this. Not this month, please." "Okay, don't do that." "Do what?" "Say okay like a man closing a door." I looked at her. 15 years of almost was sitting in the truck with us and taking up the whole back seat. "Okay," I said again, and made it a different word. She reached over and took the pencil out from behind my ear. She did not sit back right away. She stayed there in the space between the seats with 2 fingers on that pencil and her eyes somewhere around my collar, long enough that the heater got a full cycle in, and then she put it behind her own ear and told me to drive. Danica Ostrowski is 13 years old and arrived 9 months after her parents were told that ship had sailed, and she has been running the family ever since, in the way that only a youngest child can. She takes the bus to my shop on Wednesdays because her school lets out at 2:20 and her mother works until 5, and I am, on paper, 30 seconds away from being her brother-in-law. That Wednesday she wanted to run the lathe. "You can watch the lathe. You said last time I could try. When you're 14 and you've read the whole manual." "That's not what you said last time. That's what you meant." She hung her backpack on the vise. "Bill's coming at 4. She said don't let you eat crackers for lunch again." Danica rolled her eyes at the entire institution of adults. "She talks about you like you already live at our house, by the way. It's a lot." She hopped up onto the bench, which she is not supposed to do, and swung her heels. "Toby." "Danica, are you actually getting married, or are you just being nice to Babcia?" The dust collector was running. That is the only reason there was any sound in that room at all. I could have laughed. That was available to me. I could have said something about how she watches too much television, and she would have kicked the bench and moved on to asking about the lathe again, and the whole thing would have cost me 11 seconds. I did not do that because she was not asking like a kid. She was asking like somebody who had already worked out the answer and needed an adult to be brave enough to confirm it. "Why do you ask?" "Because I told my friends." She was looking at her shoes. "I told Maddie and them that my sister's getting married and she's happy now. And Maddie said, 'Again?' And I said, 'No, not again. This one's different.'" She looked up. "So is it different?" Behind her, through the doorway with no door in it, I could see the 1912 upright Billy has had in her shop for 4 years and has never finished, still stripped, still waiting on a set of hammers she keeps not ordering. "Danica, that's not an answer." "I know." She got off the bench. She got her backpack. And at the door she stopped, 13 years old, with the whole hillside behind her going orange, and said, "If it's not different, tell her before Babcia's birthday, because Babcia won't be mad. She'll just be sad, and she's 91, and she doesn't have that much sad left." Then she left, and I stood in my own shop for a while. And then I did something that I want you to watch closely, because it is the worst thing I did in this entire story, and at the time it felt like kindness. I called the Polish Hall, not to cancel. I want that on the record, for whatever it's worth, which is nothing. I asked Pete at the hall to move the November 2nd booking from a paid deposit to a courtesy hold, no money down, releasable up to 72 hours out. I told him the family was still working out numbers. I paid nothing, and I signed nothing, and I told myself it was the responsible thing, because when this ended, and it was going to end, That $300 was going to come out of Bogdan Ostrowski's checking account, and Bogdan Ostrowski works the Wednesday overnight at the grain terminal at 61 years old. I did not tell Billie. I told myself I would tell her when it came up. There is a specific kind of lie a man tells himself in the shape of a scheduling problem. It came up on Saturday at the dress shop on Superior Street, where Helena had brought her mother's veil in a garment bag she had been storing in a cedar chest since 1954. I was there because I had been dispatched to hold things and be looked at. Zofia was there in a wheelchair by the window with a coffee she was not supposed to have, holding court. Donica was there being aggressively unimpressed by everything, and Billie came out from behind the curtain in a plain ivory thing with buttons up the back, and everyone in that shop made a sound, and I forgot for 11 full seconds that any of it was invented. Then Helena's phone rang. It was Pete from the hall. He was calling about the courtesy hold because he wanted to confirm the release date, and he assumed, reasonably, that the mother of the bride would know what he was talking about. She did not know what he was talking about. I watched her face put it together in 3 stages. Standing there with her mother's veil folded over her arm. She hung up. She looked at me. You took the deposit off the hall. The shop went quiet in that way where everyone finds something to do with their hands. I moved it to a hold, I said. Nobody loses the money. When did you do this? Wednesday. Wednesday. She turned to Billie, who was standing on the platform in her grandmother's era with the buttons only half done up the back. And Helena Ostrowski said, in a voice I had not heard from her before, "Did you know?" Billie looked at me, and I watched 15 years of that woman deciding, in real time, that she was going to eat it for me. "Yes," she said. I knew. We got outside onto Superior Street, and Billie did not stop walking until she was around the corner in the alley behind the shop, where the wind comes up off the lake and finds you. "Don't," she said, before I had opened my mouth. I know what you were trying to do." She turned around. "You were trying to make sure my dad didn't lose $300 on his daughter's second fake wedding. That's what you were trying to do. Say it out loud. That's what I was trying to do. And you decided that on a Wednesday, in your shop, by yourself, about my family, and then you sat across from my mother twice and let her keep planning." Her hands were shaking, and she was not crying, which is worse. "You did the arithmetic on how this ends, and you didn't invite me to it. I know how it ends, Toby. I wrote it on a parking receipt." She pushed her hair back with both hands. "You made a decision about what I could handle. Do you understand that's the same thing he did? He decided I couldn't handle the truth in June, so he saved it for the 11th of August. That landed the way things land when they are true and unfair at the same time, which is to say, all the way. That's not what this is. Then what is it? And here is where I almost did it. I had the whole sentence loaded. You want to know why I moved that deposit? Because I have stood in a warehouse 20 feet from you for 6 years, and I finally got to put my hand on your back in a doorway. And every day of this thing has a date on it written in my own pencil. That was ready, framed, sanded, ready to install. I got as far as, and then I stopped because I looked at her face and I saw what asking would cost her that week. With a woman in a chair and a folder full of tabs and a veil from 1954 hanging over her mother's arm. "No," I said. "Forget it. That's not fair to put on you right now, and it's not my turn." She waited. She wanted me to say it. I understand that now with a clarity that keeps me awake sometimes. "Fine," she said. We did not speak for 3 days. On the 4th day, Bogdan called me and asked if I could come look at the back steps on the hillside house, which were rotted at the stringer and had been rotted at the stringer since roughly the Bush administration, and which we both knew was not why he was calling. I brought a level and a pry bar and made a show of it. He stood on the walk with his coffee. 31 years at the terminal, he said. Nights. Whole time, I never once minded it. You know when I minded it? 4 years ago, August. I was on shift when she called the house. He looked at the lake. Helena had to tell her alone. I got home at 7 in the morning, and my daughter was sitting on those steps you're standing on, in her work clothes, because she'd gone in. She went to work, Tobias. 11 days out and she went to work. I put the pry bar down. I'm not asking you what's going on, he said. My wife would ask. I'm not going to. I'm telling you that the steps are rotten, and I've known they were rotten for 6 years, and every year I say I'll get to it. And I don't, because if I fix them, then they're fixed, and then I have to find something else to worry about. He finished the coffee. Men do that. It's not a good habit. Then he went inside, and I rebuilt his back steps, and it took me 2 days. And I did not charge him, and he did not offer. On the second afternoon, Zofia knocked on the window with her good hand and made a gesture that meant, "Come in here now," which is a gesture that translates in every language. Renata got me a chair. Zofia waited until she left the room, which took a while, because Renata is thorough. "Sit," Zofia said, "closer. My ear is only good on the one side, and it is the side that faces the window, which is God's idea of a joke." I sat closer. She looked at me for a long time. 91 and a half. That left hand in her lap like a tool she had set down. "You are not going to marry my granddaughter in November," she said. The furnace kicked on down in the basement. The clock in the hall did what clocks do. "Babshia, do not." She lifted the good hand an inch. "I have buried a husband, 2 brothers, and 1 country. I know what a table sounds like when it is telling the truth and when it is being careful." She let the hand drop. "So, you will tell me." And I sat there in a chair in that overheated front room with the whole thing sitting on my tongue, and I did not say it. "No," I said. "I'm not going to tell you." Her eyebrows went up about a millimeter. "That's hers," I said. "Whatever it is, it's hers to say. And I gave her my word on a hillside that I wouldn't take it from her. So ask her. Ask her this week. She'll come." Zofia Ostrowski looked at me for a long, unhurried moment. Then she said, "Good," and turned her face back to the window, and told me my coffee was getting cold, and that was the entire conversation. Billie came to the shop on Thursday night at 9:10. I heard the side door and I did not look up, because I was gluing a rail and because I am a coward with a specific vocabulary of busy work. She came through the doorway with no door in it and stood at the end of the bench. "I ordered the hammers," she said. I looked up. "For the 1912. Ronson felt custom bore, they're $1,100 and they're non-returnable and they arrive on the 14th. She was still in her coat. "So that's happening." "Billie, I told them tonight." She said it flat and fast, the way you say a thing you have rehearsed in a truck. All of them, at the table, Mom, Dad, Donica, Babchia. I told them there's no wedding, there's no engagement, there was never a boyfriend. And I made it up in a hospital room because I couldn't stand what her face looked like when she asked who was going to check on me. I set the glue bottle down. "And I told them it was mine," she said, "not yours. That you said tell her on a hill in September the first night. And I said fine, and then I didn't, for 6 weeks, because I liked it." "What did she say?" "She said, 'And the man?' And you said?" Billie Ostrowski stood at the end of my bench in a coat she had not taken off, and looked at me the way you look at the last step in the dark when you are not sure it is there. "I said I've been in love with him since I was 19 years old in a hardware store parking lot, and I have never once been brave about it. And I built an entire fake wedding rather than ask him a question that takes 4 seconds. The shop was very cold. The dust in the north window was doing what dust does." 4 seconds, I said. "About that. Ask it." "No." She shook her head, and her chin was going, and she kept her voice level through pure stubbornness. "No, I've been the one talking for 6 weeks. I lied to a 91-year-old woman, and I let my mother buy napkins, and I let you stand in a dress shop and get yelled at for trying to save my father $300. I'm done talking. It's your turn, Tobias. It has been your turn since the parking ramp." I came around the bench. There is a version of this where I said something enormous. I have thought about that version. In it, I am eloquent, and I have prepared remarks about 15 years and the shape of a life spent building the thing that takes other people upstairs. What I said was, I'd have said yes to any of it. That was the problem. You could have asked me to be your fake anything. I know. I moved the deposit because I couldn't stand the date. I know that too. I've known that since the credit union parking lot. Her hand came up and took hold of the front of my shirt, not gently. Toby, it's 10 o'clock. Say a real thing or go back to your rail. So I put my hand on the side of her face, and the pencil came out from behind my ear and hit the concrete and rolled under the bench, and neither of us went after it. The first one was a question. She answered it. The second one was the answer arriving properly, 6 weeks and 15 years late. And somewhere in the middle of it, she made a small sound like something being set down after being carried a long way. The third one was not careful at all, and it knocked a bar clamp off the bench, and the clamp hit the floor, and she laughed against my mouth and said, "That's coming out of your deposit." "There is no deposit." "I know," she said. "I heard." Later, sitting on the floor with our backs against the bench, because there is only one chair in that shop and it has sawdust on it, she said, "You should know she wasn't mad. Your mother was mad." My mother was mad for 11 minutes, and then she asked whether the hall could still be held. Billie found my hand without looking at it. Babshia wasn't mad at all. She said one thing, and then she asked for her show. What did she say? She said, "Then it is not a wedding, it is a birthday." And then she said, "Napkins keep." We went to the birthday. November 2nd, the Polish Hall. The hold released and rebooked as a party for a woman turning 92, which cost $11 less and required no dress. There was a sheet cake and a keyboard on the stage, because the hall's piano is beyond saving, and Billie has professional standards. Danica told her whole table that her sister's boyfriend had built the steps at her house, which was true, and could bench 300 pounds, which was not. Zofia held court by the window in the good chair. Somebody had carried over from the house. When we came to say goodnight, she took my wrist with her good hand and held on longer than she needed to. "Next year," she said, on the wall. In December, I signed Nkechi's papers. It took 4 minutes. She read them out loud to me first, in a tone I would describe as pointed. The hammers arrived on the 14th and sat in the box until February, which is its own kind of honesty. Then she regulated that piano over 9 evenings, and on the 9th she played 4 bars of something with her coat still on, and the sound came through the doorway with no door in it and found me at my bench, and I put down what I was holding. I proposed in April at St. Adalbert's on a Tuesday, while she was inside a piano with a penlight in her teeth. I did not get down on anything. I took her pencil out of her hair, which was my pencil, and I wrote it on the inside of the lid. Small, at the bottom of the column, under 120 years of dead men's handwriting. Then I closed the lid and asked her if she wanted to check my work. She came out from under the piano with grease on her forearm. She read it twice. Then she said, "You spelled Wilhelmina wrong," and put her hand over her mouth and said yes about 4 seconds later. We were married at the hall on November 2nd, the following year, on Zofia Ostrowski's 93rd birthday, because the woman had made her position clear and because napkins keep. Bogdan gave the only toast we allowed. He held the microphone too close, the way men of his generation do, and he said he had watched me rebuild his backsteps in 2 days after he had failed to do it in 6 years, and that some men fix the thing in front of them because they are afraid to look at the thing behind it, and that he was one of those men, and so was I, and that his daughter had never once in her life been afraid of a staircase. Then he said, also he did not charge me, and sat down. They hung the photograph on the side wall in January, 4 frames down from a 19-year-old girl in a borrowed dress in 1954. Zofia is in the front of ours, in the chair, in the middle, where she put herself. Renata wheeled her the length of that room in February so she could see it, past every wedding in that building since before the war. And at the end, she stopped in front of the 2 that were hers and said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Now I am on the wall twice," and asked to be taken home, because it was cold and her show was on. We still have the warehouse. There is still no door in the doorway. There is a second chair in my shop now, which is hers, and it also has sawdust on it, because she does not care and neither do I. Last week, I was gluing up a rail for a house out on the shore, and she came through the doorway with a coffee and took the pencil from behind my ear. the way she has been taking it since we were 19, and I said what I always say, which is that there is a shoebox somewhere with 100 of them in it. She didn't answer. She turned my forearm over instead, on the inside, just below the wrist, in the exact place where a date used to be. And she signed it, her initials, and the date, small, the way a tuner signs the inside of a lid. "There," she said. "You do good work, you sign it small, and you get in line." What would you have done if your best friend asked you to lie to someone she loved, and the lie turned out to be the truest thing either of you had said in 15 years? And have you ever pretended to be something with someone, only to find out that you were both extremely bad at pretending? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.